Welcome. My name is Jeff Brubaker. I'm a senior planner in the Boston office of Tool Design. We plan and design bicycle and pedestrian projects throughout North America. Often, we think of riding a bike and walking as primarily urban activities. However, bicycle and pedestrian projects can be good fits for rural areas and smaller communities as well. As the title slide says, Francisco and I gave a Complete Streets presentation at the NHCOG offices on August 15th, 2019, and these slides and narration are a modified but similar version of my half of the presentation. My presentation will cover the concept of complete streets in town and village centers, rural roadways and trails, local policy tools, and rural case studies. Complete streets is a concept to describe streets that are designed to be safe and comfortable for people using all modes of transportation and all ages and abilities, including people walking, riding a bike, using public transportation, and driving. That doesn't mean all streets accommodate all modes with equal priority. The important thing is that the overall network serves all users and that streets have a basic level of accommodation for each mode. Towns, cities, regions, and states make formal commitments to complete streets through adopted complete streets policies. These documents typically include many, if not all, of the 10 sections recommended by the National Complete Streets Coalition. There are at least 10 municipal policies in Connecticut and a state law and ConnDOT policy committing the state to a complete streets approach. Tool Design and FHI have recently worked with the Capital Region Council of Governments on crafting a policy for the Hartford region. Since the concept of complete streets was coined about 20 years ago, there have been over 1,400 complete streets policies adopted or approved nationwide. So complete streets include pedestrian improvements like sidewalks, crosswalks, curb extensions, and curb ramps that help people with disabilities navigate the street. They include improvements for riding a bike, like bike paths and bike lanes, and they can include improvements for transit, such as bus stops and shelters. Strategies for implementing complete streets include new construction, traffic calming, and travel lane reconfiguration, which is sometimes referred to as a road diet. This is a street in Swansea, South Carolina, population 827. At this point, the group in attendance offered their ideas on how the street could be designed to feel more complete. So this is the before image. And here's a rendering that we did for the street. And it includes many of the ideas the group thought of, like new street trees, curb extensions, and wider sidewalks, while retaining on-street parking. The design intends to make the street comfortable and accessible for people, no matter what mode of transportation they choose. So complete streets can help address public health and traffic safety issues in rural areas. Compared to the general population, the population in rural areas is older and has higher rates of physical inactivity, obesity, and diabetes. And rural areas experience fatal traffic crash rates that are disproportionately high relative to population. Complete streets contribute to positive economic outcomes for rural communities. They expand travel choices, make it easier to spend less on transportation, and tend to have a positive effect on property values. Part of the draw of vibrant, traditional main streets in town and village centers is that they are complete streets. These are the kinds of streets that attract investment and visitors who spend money at local businesses. Trails for people to walk and bike can draw visitors from around the region and even around the country. Those visiting overnight usually using longer trails or trail systems, spend significant amounts on hotels and food and other items. This creates stable jobs in rural communities. We can build complete streets that are sensitive to a rural context, considering surrounding land uses, travel needs of residents and other users, and other factors. You can adopt any number of complete streets design approaches depending on context, with a few basic examples shown here. Pedestrian infrastructure is important in town and village centers because they tend to have rural regions' highest numbers of people walking. Sidewalks, curb extensions, curb ramps, trees, benches, and decorative elements are great for safety, comfort, and aesthetics, and they really help to improve the local retail environment. Sidewalks are the basic building block of pedestrian comfort and safety. On this slide, you can see an example of dimensional recommendations for the pedestrian realm. Wide sidewalks, frontage zones, and furnishing zones provide increased comfort to users, and these are especially important and should widen in commercial retail areas. So what about crossing the street? Well, high visibility crosswalks make it easier for drivers to see people crossing. Raised crossings also improve visibility while slowing speed, and curb extensions shorten crossing distances, reducing exposure time in the street. When designing roads and streets that are welcoming for people to ride a bike, know that each street is different and has its own unique context. There may not be a perfect facility design, but by considering the factors shown here, among others, you can narrow down the range of potential options. A general principle to follow for all contexts, including rural town contexts, is to physically separate bike facilities from motor vehicle traffic at higher speeds or volumes. At lower speeds and volumes, people on bikes mixing with traffic might be preferred. Bike lanes provide exclusive space for people to bike, but are not physically separated from traffic, so they tend to be seen as having a moderate stress level. Where space is available, a striped buffer helps to put space between the bike lane and the general travel lane, as shown in the photo, or between the bike lane and on-street parking. Separated bike lanes physically separate users from traffic and provide high levels of comfort and safety and low levels of traffic stress, even with higher traffic speeds and volumes. They can be at the street or sidewalk level, and they can be one-way or two-way. So at intersections, minimizing exposure of people riding bikes to motor vehicle traffic is a strategy for improving safety. And the point here is to reduce the locations at which a crash could occur. Transition zones alert drivers that they are approaching the town or village and use a number of design strategies to get them to slow down. And here we have strategies for achieving the same goal when you are dealing with a more constrained right-of-way. Roundabouts, curb lines, raised medians, and vegetation can be placed at gateways to town and village centers to slow travel speeds approaching a main street. Speed reduction is so important because the higher a driver's speed at the time of a collision with a pedestrian, the pedestrian has an exponentially higher chance of dying from the collision. When you drive at lower speeds, you also have a wider cone of vision to be aware of what's going on in front of you and along the side of the street. When side paths are not feasible, shoulders are common bicycle facilities for rural roads. However, the appropriate facility and space requirements are determined by traffic volume and speed. Paved shoulders serve multiple purposes, including providing space for riding a bike and walking on rural roads without side paths, and serving as a recovery area for errant motor vehicles. At minimum, shoulders should be 4 to 5 feet to accommodate bicycle travel. If travel lanes have excess width, narrowing them can enable more space for the shoulder. So trails are a familiar feature in Northwest Connecticut, and NHCOG has great information and maps on its website. So I don't need to say a lot here. Shared use paths are trails that are typically paved with asphalt or concrete or have surfaces such as gravel or stone dust. And they are great for all types of communities, from rural to urban, with longer regional trails, sometimes passing through multiple land use contexts. So trails tend to be popular because they are quiet, they're often accessible and usable for people of all ages and abilities. They often provide access to nature, they're free of motor vehicle traffic, and they provide an overall comfortable walking and bicycling experience. Side paths are shared use paths built within the right-of-way, again providing a comfortable and low-stress walking or cycling experience for all ages and abilities, even on higher speed or volume roads due to their separation from traffic. Side paths should be separated from the adjacent road, ideally by 6.5 feet or more. Landscaping and trees can provide a greater feeling of separation while helping maintain a rural character. So just a few quick examples of complete streets improvements for crossing the street. This graph shows how to decide on a potential crossing improvement based on traffic speed and volume, although many other factors inform this decision. At higher speeds and volumes, marked crosswalks alone are insufficient and should be supplemented with other crossing enhancements. So pedestrian crossing islands provide physical separation and refuge at the midpoint of a crosswalk, allowing for people to cross in 2 stages. They are a proven safety countermeasure and a potential strategy for enhancing crosswalks and shared use path crossings. Another option is the rectangular rapid flashing beacon, or RRFB, which is a device that accompanies the crosswalk sign and rapidly flashes to increase driver yielding rates at uncontrolled intersections. It's useful for crossings in areas where there is a documented low yielding rate for motor vehicles yielding to pedestrians. For higher volume street or trail crossings, pedestrian hybrid beacons can be used to create a regulatory stop. They flash a red light for motor vehicles when activated by a pedestrian. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention wayfinding. It's so important for assisting people to navigate onto and off of trails and to navigate to destinations. And it provides simple, concise messages to help people understand where they are relative to landmarks and popular destinations, and also creates a sense of identity for the community. So 2 quick examples of rural communities collaborating with state departments of transportation. These 3 communities in Virginia along US Route 50 worked with the state DOT to incorporate roundabouts, reduce speed limits, raised medians, and high visibility crosswalks at town entrances and through the communities. And this rural community in California worked with Caltrans, which is the state DOT, the MPO, the county government, and a local tribal government to install these decorative paved shoulders, as well as restripe, improve signage, and improve lighting in this rural section of California. So this is the last slide, and that concludes my presentation. Thanks again to NHCOG for the opportunity, and I hope it is useful.
Hi, I'm Francisco Gomes with Fitzgerald and Halliday, and today I'm going to talk about some local policy tools for complete streets. First of all, there are some really good workbooks out there that can help you with this. By example, the Complete Streets Local Policy Workbook from the National Complete Streets Coalition is full of pages that are really helpful in guiding any community in implementing complete streets and adopting policies that support complete streets. But there are some other tools that are used locally that we use here in Connecticut, and those include plans of conservation and development, bicycle and pedestrian master plans, municipal ordinances, and zoning design guidelines, subdivision regulations, all of which we've used with communities to help promote complete streets. First of all, plan of conservation and development is really where much of this can begin, and it provides the foundation for all the complete streets work that can be done in a community. By example is Bridgeport's master plan, which is Plan Bridgeport. And this is a plan we worked with the city and just completed this past year. And one of our goals in the top right corner there is to adopt a complete streets approach to transportation planning and improvements. We had a series of strategies for the town, the first of which being to adopt a complete streets policy. Another town that we've worked with includes town of Simsbury. We completed a bicycle and pedestrian master plan for them. And the bicycle and pedestrian component of complete streets is really an area of focus for very obvious reasons. And that's because bikes and peds have really very often been left out of the equation with respect to the design and planning of our streets. And so by conducting a bicycle and pedestrian master plan, a community can really figure out what their priorities are, which corridors and what areas of the town need the most focus, and can use that to make decisions about transportation investments moving forward. Now, what preceded the work that we did in Simsbury was the adoption of a complete streets resolution by the town of Simsbury. And that resolution really set forth in motion the work that we did in the bicycle and pedestrian master plan, and really provided some guidance as to how the town should go about planning for the maintenance and management of its transportation infrastructure. In addition to complete streets policies, any community zoning, design guidelines, or subdivision regulations provide an opportunity to provide complete streets, or to provide regulations, I should say, that encourage or require complete streets elements. In this example here, some of the zoning language on the right is from the Thompsonville Village in Enfield, and that's zoning that we wrote for the community. And within that zoning, we had public amenity requirements that basically required a developer to provide functional public open space and sidewalks within the development and along the street front of any development. Now, I'd like to profile some examples of our work in smaller communities in both rural and kind of rural suburban contexts. And the first one being Branchville Village in Ridgefield. Branchville is a small village in the southeastern corner of Ridgefield near both Reading and Wilton. It has a Metro North Danbury Branch Line station, and it's a nice little place, a lot of small shops, restaurants, but not very walkable. And as you can see in this image, there are no sidewalks anywhere in sight. Now, the project had its origins as a transit-oriented development project, but we really took a complete streets approach because that was really the most noticeable aspect of the project that would benefit the use of transit, was providing much more robust pedestrian amenities throughout the village center. But there were additional goals of transit-oriented development, and that is to increase the use of transit, to stimulate economic development, to improve air quality, to reduce traffic congestion, and complete streets play a role in all of this. We started the project by establishing a vision, and within that vision, a well-connected pedestrian environment was really central to the concept. A little bit about the transportation network in Branchville. It's the intersection of two state routes, 102 and Route 7. And Route 7 carries more than 20,000 vehicles a day, 202 slightly less, 5,000 to 6,000. As I mentioned, there's the Danbury Branch train line that runs on the east side of what is the Norwalk River and the east side of Route 7. And the area is also served by a bus. The headways are pretty far in between, but the Heart 7 link does travel north-south along Route 7 with a stop in Branchville. The pedestrian network and the transportation network, we noted very quickly a lot of deficiencies, and there were some intersections that needed improvement, lack of pedestrian network, some bridges that were old and needed some work that did not have sidewalks on them. And so a range of improvements really concentrated in proximity to the train station. We also provided the town with a development strategy. That's the development part of transit-oriented development. That included medium density residential and infill commercial and mixed-use retail with residential, along with some public open space. The residential development we envisioned was medium density townhouses, apartment buildings with high quality of design, something that would be compatible with the architecture in the area. And it's really this level of density that makes it easier to support more robust pedestrian facilities. First of all, you can get the developer to build these things out as they develop the properties. Included within that vision was really more infill development and commercial, retail, restaurant, service-based development to activate the area and to bring it back to life as a village center. The Route 102, Route 7 intersection was a big focus for us, as I mentioned earlier. And so we provided recommendations for far more complete pedestrian facilities in the area, including some pedestrian bridges over the Norwalk River and some of its tributaries, with sidewalks connecting to the train station, connecting to storefronts, and shortened crossings, more complete crossings at the intersection, along with bus stop and bus shelter as well for the Heart 7 link. This is a little further south in the project area and continuing those very similar improvements down to the south side of the station, providing access to the station from the south as well. Stormwater management is also a very important part of this equation, as it is an important part of complete streets. And the town, like any other town in Connecticut, has a stormwater management plan and is under a mandate to reduce stormwater runoff and really, in this case, to protect the water quality of the Norwalk River. One way that could be accomplished is to provide, as you can see in some of the images here, some infiltration trenches, rain gardens. In addition to that, permeable pavements or detention basins as a means of collecting water, infiltrating water, rather than shed it directly into the Norwalk River. So Route 7 looking north, this was before any proposed changes. And as you can see, there's no sidewalks. There is a shoulder that can accommodate cyclists. It's not designated as a bike lane. And the shoulder is not much of a shoulder on the right side or east side of the roadway. And so what we envision and what we recommended through our work on the project are, first of all, sidewalks, infill development to those sidewalks, landscaping, and street trees, pedestrian scale lighting, maintaining a shoulder for cyclists and providing a shoulder on the east side of the road as well. And eventually, when some of the property uses change in the area, reclaiming some public open space and providing a shared use pathway on the east side of Route 7 along the river. Now, the tools that we use, the policy tools that we recommended to support all of this include, in this case, really rezoning the area. Now, the town is yet to adopt that zoning. We finished the work a couple of years ago, and these things take a long time. But the zoning would require that, well, first of all, the zoning would allow the development as we show it. And then it would go further to require developers to build out some of that infrastructure along their properties and development. The project status, the project has received over $6 million, $6.5 million of funding via local bridge program and state transportation alternatives program. And we worked with the town on some of those grant applications to help leverage that funding. And it is now that the sidewalk enhancements, the pedestrian enhancements are now under design, as well as some bridge replacements are now in design and engineering, and we are working with one of the engineering teams to make sure that the sidewalk network as built out is aligned with the vision we established in the transit-oriented development plan. Construction is anticipated to begin as early as next year. Another example I'd like to profile, and this is a project we did a few years before Branchville, so it's a little further ahead, is the Brookfield Four Corners project in Brookfield, which is north along Route 7. So that's the Four Corners today, and but we'll need to back up a little bit in time to better appreciate where this project has come from and how far it's come since this picture, or before this picture was taken. The Four Corners area is really a mix of a very limited commercial and retail. The Four Corners themselves are the corners of the intersection of Route 202 and Route 25. And each one of those corners has a gas station currently. And we envision that's going to change over time, so we provide a vision for what that could look like when that changes. Transit is very limited here. There's no longer metro. Once upon a time there was train service up to this area. There's a train station, but there is not service now. There really isn't any other type of transit service in the area. A few images of what it looks like. Sidewalks are extremely limited. And just a few segments. So the network is not connected at all. And some property owners, and in this case a florist, has really taken the initiative to put out stepping stones for people. So that shows that there is demand and need, but the facilities aren't there. Now the town did, however, require sidewalks of developers, and as you can see, there's a sidewalk leading to some townhouses that, unfortunately, when it arrives at the state highway, there are no facilities there to receive. Similar to Branchville, we developed a vision in this plan, and this vision was comprised of guiding principles. And those guiding principles, the primary of which was to provide a walkable, well-connected pedestrian scale environment, and really to balance the transportation modes and to provide some functional open space as well. Four Corners land use, as I mentioned, it's really a mix of residential and commercial, as well as vacant land, which affords an opportunity for infill development. And so we developed a development concept, an infill development concept, that in the bottom left corner envisions a future redevelopment of the gas stations. And the dotted lines and the arrows all mean connections, right? The dotted lines are pedestrian connections throughout the area. So the vision is really quite comprehensive for infill development. And as we were conducting a workshop for this, we had a developer approach us that was interested in doing a development similar as to what I had on that slide. And I'll get into that in a moment. But first of all, the most important aspect of this is really stitching together all that development by providing a well-connected, comfortable pedestrian environment. So this rendering that we did really shows and demonstrates what it is that looks like and what it is that means. And so you can see very wide sidewalks, street trees, decorative pedestrian lighting, and on the east side of the roadway, a separated bike facility as well. The town is working to complete a greenway network that with bike paths along, in this case it's the Still River here. And so we're trying to accommodate bikes through this project area, off street and along the sidewalk in this example. We also worked with the town to rewrite the zoning for the area to make all of this possible, and the zoning requires buildings to be built up to the street line, requires pedestrian connections throughout, and it really seeks to push the parking to the side and the back and create an environment where people park once and then make all their trips, the rest of their trips, on foot. And that encourages people to get out, to mix around, makes it a more lively environment, and really takes a few cars off the streets that would otherwise be circulating to park. A really important part of this is providing facade guidelines for the buildings and for commercial buildings and retailers. And what these guidelines do are really to try to ensure that the edge of the street, and this is a really important part of complete streets, that the walls of the street and the edges of the street are active and vibrant and interesting. And so in this case, we have requirements for glass requirements so you can see into stores, and so people and shopkeepers and stores can see out. That improves the feeling and sense of security, and some lighting requirements as well. And all of that will create just a far more engaging and environment that feels a lot more secure. In addition to that, bikes, as I mentioned, are an important part of this, and we provided bicycle parking requirements similar to car parking requirements that have requirements for indoor parking facilities for residential developments and also outdoor parking along the street and sidewalks and parking areas as well. The project has been moving forward very early on, shortly after our work, and this dates back to 2013 now. The town started working on design and engineering of the streetscape as we had envisioned it. And the voters and residents of the town got behind that with some funding. They approved funding at referendum. And so the work had got started a few years ago, both the infrastructure aspects of the work and development. And the picture on the right is the developer that had come into our workshop. And at that point, the developer was interested in doing a traditional suburban style CVS with parking in front. And we showed the developer what was possible through the zoning that we'd be writing, that he could do a lot more with the property. And so what you see on the right there is a development that's now more or less complete and includes upper floors residential, lower floor retail, and is built to the street front and pushes the parking to the side and the back. So going back to 2014, a couple years after our work, as viewed from the air, really the only pedestrian facilities you can see here are a couple of crosswalks and curb ramps. And that was it. That was the state of it, with a lot of vacant, underutilized property in the center. And 2018, we have the development, and the lower left of the screen is the development picture I showed you on the previous slide, and the bottom half of that development is cut off. But this development is really anticipated to move on to a later phase, and so the gas station that's in the corner there near the development and the other property would also be redeveloped, and so that would build out the street front in that area. But what's most noticeable in this image is the pedestrian environment that's been created. Really wide sidewalks throughout the area, improved crossings, connections all the way to the east to the old train station, where there's also an arts center over there as well, and improved crossings at that location. I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. So that's a closer view of what it looks like today. And the development on the lower left is the development that fronts the street and was prior to that going to be a CVS set back from the roadway. So you can see there's a very strong connection, a relationship between that building and the street, with really wide sidewalks through the area. On-street parking as well, which is both an amenity and helps to calm traffic, provide a buffer between pedestrians and traffic. There's street lighting. Some of the trees have yet to be planted, but I think this spring they were going in. This was a picture taken over the winter. And at street level, this is what it looks like. And you can see that it's already being decorated. It had been decorated for the holidays with some nice banners. So the town has really embraced this as their village center. And you can see it's a remarkable difference from what it was before. And there are safety improvements as well. This is an improved crosswalk at the Craft Center, and that's the old train station in the background. So not only is the area more comfortable, it's also become safer to navigate as a pedestrian. And the project continues. It's under design and engineering right now to proceed further south. So they're going to extend this project another quarter mile or so to the south. And that will really create a really nice district that'll be a good place for people to walk and to make some trips on foot. So that concludes our presentation, and thank you very much for learning about Complete Streets today.